Welcome to EdLeader with your host, Dr. Rob Jackson. Join Dr. Jackson for conversations and reflections on improving educational leadership from the classroom to the boardroom and beyond. Educational leadership is an ever-evolving opportunity to make a real and lasting difference in the lives of students, parents, and the community. And now, here's your host, Dr. Rob Jackson.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the EdLeader podcast. I'm your host, Rob Jackson, and I want to thank you for spending time with me today. The podcast hosting service reports that over the last 10 EdLeader episodes, listeners have tuned in from 17 different countries, including our very first listener from the Czech Republic. I appreciate our listeners in all 50 states and around the world. I hope that the EdLeader podcast is adding value to you and to your work. On this episode, we return to an incredible conversation with 3 North Carolina State Principals of the Year. The subject is the recent Wallace Foundation research on the effect of principals on students in schools. If you haven't yet, I would invite you to go back to the previous EdLeader episode when I had the opportunity to talk with one of the co-authors of this research, Dr. Anna Egalite, a professor at NC State University. For now, though, I hope you enjoy part 2 of Effective Principals Affect Students in Schools with Ms. Kisha Clemmons, Mr. Tabari Wallace, and Dr. Carrie Talbert. Let's get to it. Well, friends, I have absolutely enjoyed our conversation around these key findings, and I'm looking forward to moving forward with the last 4 key findings from this Wallace Foundation report on how principals affect students in schools. And so I want to turn to you, Tabari, with this 4th finding, because I know it's an area of passion for you and for all of us. And I look forward to hearing how you see this work in your work. And it's this: principals must develop an equity lens, particularly as they are called on to meet the needs of a growing number of marginalized students. Tabari, talk to us about the need for an equity lens for principals.
Equity lens begins with the term of each and every. A lot of time as a human species, we will go out and we will say, oh, yes, I'm providing effective instruction for all of my students. That is the big cop-out is saying that. But what we found out that in the approach of using all, marginalized students and others can get lost in that terminology of all. But you can't get lost in each and every, because it makes you be intentional and going forward, you're intentional with providing instruction for that particular child. And a lot of times equity gets lost in demographics, or it could be, racial. They love to throw racial out there. But again, those terms are actually dividing us. Mm-hmm. What equity means is each and every child, irregardless of what your disposition is celebrating those unique traits that you have in regards to culture building. It's recognizing the various different things that you celebrate, but it's celebrating those unique disposition and those qualities that each and every child brings to the table. Now, in regards to academics, all the standards never change. If the standards change, it's a 2 to 3 process coming from DPI before they're deployed. So we're teaching the same standards. What teachers have to understand is that we empower them, we support them, we provide them resources into how to use the curriculum. The curriculum illustrates the standards so that students will now learn from what each objective you're trying to teach them. But the examples that you use, the background information you give per standard should be viewed and constructed with an equity lens. It's almost like a 3-pronged approach. You have the standard. Now, due to the demographic breakdown in my class, how can I reach each and every child within that class so that they not only learn the objective in short-term memory? Research states that when you invest and you go, yes, the east side. Rob's hearing exactly what I'm hearing. I'm telling you, because he's over here on this side. But when you invest,
bringing the thunder.
Yeah,
say, I know Kisha's got, we've certainly.
Yeah, you need to quit. But when you invest in each and every child, you're purposeful in using the examples that will reach his or her culture. And it's not racial. It can be economic disposition. It could be religion. It could be EC. It could be AIG. It doesn't have to be along racial bounds. Equity is about serving all children. So that's what I'll say in that lens. Teachers, we really need you going forward to be intentional when you're doing that. When you're developing your lesson, just keep in mind that equity lens to use the examples that each and every child can identify with. So it goes to long-term memory, not that reciprocal short-term memory where they retain it just for the test and then they forget it.
Tabari, I love that. As you were sharing that we sometimes lose children in using the terminology all, and we need to use the terminology each and every. I was reflecting on my first year as a superintendent, and I was so proud, my friends, with my theme. And the theme that I brought to a brand new district as a brand new superintendent was hashtag I believe. And I spent a lot of time. You guys know me. You know how much I talk about believing in others. And I talked about I believe, I believe, I believe. And through the course of that year, I realized that we were missing something. And it's exactly what you were just talking about. And so in year 2, the theme grew and matured as I grew and matured. And the theme became hashtag I believe in you. And it became very specific, very intentional. And it's exactly what you're talking about, Tabari. As I grew as an educator, I realized that just what you said, I just couldn't say it as eloquently. I wish I could, that sometimes we lose some children when we use all as opposed to each and every. Kisha, as you think about this equity lens, you're there in the school, you're working so hard. How does that impact your work? And what is your message to all of our colleagues around this equity lens? It's certainly something that is front and center in our community, and it should be. But how is that impacting your work, and how does it impact your work, and how should it impact your work?
Yes, sir, Rob. I think that we first have to understand and realize that, historically schools have not been designed to meet the needs of each and every student. And we have to know that there are populations of students that are historically marginalized, that we need to be able to get in front of this and really design our system, our educational system to meet those needs. And I think it really starts with leadership and being culturally responsive and being able to model that, starting with really reflecting on ourselves and our practices, but also creating an environment where our staffs are able to recognize and identify bias and assumptions that we have about students so that we can kind of turn this thing around and start looking at how do we make sure that schools are inclusive for each and every student. I think that is so important. And I think sometimes that we, look at things through a lens of being colorblind, or that, we love all kids, and we do love all kids, but we also know that opportunities are not the same and access is not the same for each and every kid. And we have to make sure that we design a system that works for each and every. I'm using your words, Mr. Wallace, because I use all a lot, but I know that we really want to make sure that each and every kid gets what they need. And we have to think beyond what we've traditionally set up for them. And we have to challenge the status quo and make sure that we are challenging each other to make sure that we're creating an equitable, inclusive environment for our students.
I tell you what, you're not kidding. And there is great power in words. And I could hear, Kisha, as you were catching yourself, as you just about said all, and you picked up on each and every. And I was doing the same exact thing. And that's what learners do, right? We learn, we grow, we try to mature in the work. And I just appreciate the three of you continuing to push this through. Equity is a topic that could really be a whole podcast series, quite frankly. And I don't want to run away from that topic. So let me ask Carrie to speak to that as well. Carrie, when you hear this work, and Tabari and Kisha have shared with us about the equity lens and how that impacts their work, how is that impacting your work and what you're doing there?
That's a great question. And I know, I'm just like goosebumping all over with what Tabari and Kisha have said, because I love what Tabari said about each and every as well. It just makes me think about the teacher evaluation instrument that says all over it to be accomplished or distinguished. It makes me think of hashtag all lives matter. Like But it just now the word all is like driving me crazy. So I'm so glad that you said that, Tabari, because it's not. You're right. Anyway, back to Northview. So before I've been at Northview, I led Concord Middle School in Cabarrus County Schools, and it was a restart school, the lowest performing school in Cabarrus County Schools, and it was a challenge. And it was really about each and every child and what they brought to the table and how we could help each and every child grow. Not all children, but each and every child, and really just taking that approach to be very individualized. And now here, coming to a pretty traditionally high-performing school is really very different for me. And so that's why I'm very passionate about changing the population of our students and making sure that it is more of an inclusive environment for each and every child, not for all children, but each and every child. And our teachers are on board. And I think, again, like what Kisha said, the leader kind of has to set the tone, whether that be the superintendent or the principal, about believing in the power of what we can do for each and every child. So I believe we're in the right track at our current school. And just, again, it's about changing small things that'll make a big difference. And small things can be anywhere from how you do applications to how you place kids in honors courses, how you place kids as AIG identified, what you're doing with your MTSS processes to intervene for students, and how you're treating each and every child, not all children that are in that part of the pyramid or the triangle that you're focusing on with MTSS. So it's really just in the small things, I think, as a principal, that you can do when you see one little pocket of like, oh, we can change this here. Let's do that. And then let's look for another one. Okay, we can change this here. Let's do that. And it's, again, about what you believe as a leader, of always looking through that lens with that equity approach. And again, Tabari, I want to sing what you said from the rooftops, because it was so good. It was awesome.
Absolutely. Every single one matters, and every single one is worthy of our very best efforts. And all three of us said, Tabari, thank you so much for that, because that will certainly be something that continues to resonate in our work as we really think about not letting children be hidden in big words like all, even though it seems like a small word, but really being very intentional. It is a big word. It truly is. As you said, it's ubiquitous throughout our teacher evaluation instrument and most of our ed literature. And so we've got to do that work. As we move forward, though, in this fifth summary of key findings, it's something that we don't necessarily as a society like to talk about a whole lot, but I've certainly seen that it's true. And so we need to speak about it. And so I want to kind of dive into this. And Tabari, with your role in the state now, you've probably seen some of this. And Kisha and Carrie, I'm sure you've seen it in your work as well. The fifth finding is this: effective principals are not equitably distributed across schools. Let me say that again. It's an ugly truth. Effective principals are not equitably distributed across schools. Tabari, what does that say to you?
Boy, that's a tough one. I will say this. No, they are not. They're not. I don't think they're placed where they're needed currently right now. A lot of that has to do with and I can't blame superintendents for this, because we have this law that our principal compensation package is wrapped up into, if you send an effective principal somewhere and over 3 years, they don't show growth 2 of those 3 years, they're labeled. So superintendents kind of are stuck with, do I want to put them down there to fix this school, which takes 5 years? And then if something happens or they don't stay there long enough, will they be labeled as an ineffective principal, which means if you're pulled from that school and sent somewhere else, superintendent has to write a letter to the parents and everything else. So I will say our current approach of compensation kind of handcuffs superintendents, but I don't think that they are where they're needed. Case in point, I was the journeyman of Craven County. And I didn't realize what was being done until it was all said and done and it was over. But I was sent from, one school, we get it turned around, Havelock Middle. That took a while to get it, but we were outperforming our counterparts, I actually closed the gap 2014, 2 years running. So then from that, they saw that success, and Lane Mills shifted me to H.J. McDonald, which was twice the size. And they had redistricted and piled 4 projects into one school. And they were like, yeah, Tabari, you pull that off at Havelock Middle, you go there and try to make that one work. But we did it. We used culture. to get it turned around, and we're all in this together. They put us in the school. Let's make it happen. And the kids made it happen. One vision, one school, one squad all day was the mantra we went with. And the kids loved it and ran with it. So we excelled in. Then they sent me to probably one of the most difficult schools in Craven County, which is Ride or Fly Nation, Eagle Nation. And we've arrived at Eagle Nation. We've managed to get that turned around and get rolling there as well. So it used to be superintendents would shift you back and forth and try to get these schools turned around and try to train up that capacity in each school. So when you leave, it sustains itself. But I can say it's tough for superintendents. I really empathize with what they're going through, because if you take an effective principal and put them there, but if you don't turn that thing around in really 2 years, I'm going to say 3, then it's repercussions for that effective principal. And that's what superintendents have to weigh in this new approach and compensation.
Thank you for mentioning that, because I do think that's a part of it. And it is something that we have to continue to really amplify the voice of local districts around how sometimes state policies can make it tough to do what we need to do. But I don't want to let myself or fellow superintendents off the hook, because just like a principal finds a workaround in a school building when the district office says you can't do that this way, and principals figure out how to do that just a different way. Great principals do that, right? Superintendents can figure that out as well. And so, I think there's something to be said for some of our schools that may have the perception of being some of the toughest schools. Principals may not desire to go to those schools and may say to a superintendent, I don't know if I want to go to that school. I'd really like to go to this school. And some of that is important. You really want principals to be where they're happy and feel effective, but really that encouraging among ourselves the risk taking, to be willing to go to the tough places and say, hey, here's the thing. This seems to be working really well. I want to serve in an area where they have some tough challenges, because those children, and I don't mean those in any negative connotation, but it goes back to what you said, Tabari, each and every child deserves the very best. And so I don't want to run from that. And so when we think about this, distributing principals across schools, and some schools really sometimes struggling to get great principals, and then struggling to keep great principals who go there and then hit the door pretty quickly. It's not something that's as fun to talk about as student success, but it's something that we really have to address as a profession. Kisha, what do you think? Am I missing the mark in what I'm thinking there, or is that something that kind of resonates in what you've seen?
Yes, Rob. I mean, I will tell you, my first principalship, I was in a school that was, designated as a low performing school. The district was a low performing district, and, it's a brand new principal. And so what we do see is a lot of times in schools that are the most challenging, that are designated as low performing or some other kind of designation, are often led by principals that don't have a lot of experience, and maybe not the highest quality, because they are new and just trying to figure it all out. So I think that we have to do something even beyond at the LEA level in making sure that our most challenging has the highest quality principals and teachers in those schools, and we have to create a system to be able to do that. And you mentioned about, even when you get a high quality principal in a challenging school, you have to be able to retain them. So we have to create an ecosystem within our districts to make sure that those principals have the support they need and that they're able to thrive and really do the work.
Absolutely, Kisha. You are right on the money. Carrie, I don't want to miss your perspective on this. And so share with us how this washes over you.
I think the one thing that hasn't been said yet, and I know that, Rob, I love what you said about not making excuses as a superintendent, because, I think some of us, myself included, sometimes like, oh, if the state would change this, or legislators would see that would be a $17,000 pay difference, oh, life would be so much easier. No, it's not. There's going to be something else we have to work through. So we can't make excuses. And I truly appreciate your saying that, Rob, so much. You have no idea. But also in the same grain, I think that something that is getting totally missed in the mark is that teacher pipeline is decreasing. We all know that. And the same thing is going to happen to the administrator pipeline. That's going to decrease. And the same thing is going to happen to the central office administrative pipeline. We're seeing that across the state with superintendents and the tenure that North Carolina superintendents have in districts right now. is shockingly and alarmingly very small. And so if leadership is consistently turning over because of whatever, if it's jacked up pay that doesn't make any sense, sorry for the terrible language, but or not being placed appropriately as a principal to meet the strengths or where you can help the school grow, then we're going to make that pipeline even smaller. And I truly believe, whether it's us or legislators or all of the above, each and every one of us has to passionately try to build that teacher pipeline and that principal pipeline, because superintendents can't place principals effectively if there aren't enough people interested in doing the job. And you have to be interested and love what you're doing to be effective and to be solid. And so that's going to happen with support. That's going to happen with continuous learning. That's going to happen with those superintendents that have the experience and the knowledge to do some of that back work you were mentioning. A first-year superintendent may not know how to work that, may not be able to say to their experienced principal, yes, Tabari, I can get you to this school and you're not going to have a $17,000 pay cut. I will do what I can. Not many first-year superintendents, I think, would know how to work that, because you're working the politics of people that are not always educators. And so I feel like we have to build that pipeline, and you have to be passionate and positive about your profession. I think sometimes, again, we can all get bogged down, especially now with this pandemic. But I feel like as principals and school administrators, we have a deep responsibility to encourage others to, if they're interested, or to start tapping into their talents, to say, hey, listen, I think you'd make a great school administrator, and this is why. Because I would guarantee if you surveyed the principals across the state of North Carolina right now and said, why'd you go into administration? Probably most of them would say, well, somebody said I'd be pretty good at it. And so that encourager, that supporter. So we can't miss the responsibility that we have as school administrators and superintendents to tap into that talent and encourage others so that there are effective principals to choose from to put into our neediest and in our schools that just need you the most. So I really believe in that. We're missing the mark in how we're trying to encourage others to be principals like us. And it's the best job in education. I truly believe that. And I want people to know that. It's hard. It's the hardest job in education. Sorry, Rob. But it's a beautiful job. It's so worth it. And we need more great people doing it, not to shy away from it because of pay or because of, whatever. It's just, we need more effective principals, and we got to tap into the talents of our teachers and really help them see how they can be effective school administrators.
Carrie, you're exactly right. And in fact, that is the perfect segue to the next finding from this Wallace Foundation on how principals affect students in schools. And so, Kisha, I want to turn to you with this important finding that came out of the research. Principals are becoming more racially and ethnically diverse, but representation gaps with students are growing, which is concerning given the payoffs to principal diversity. And so Carrie was just talking about this principal pipeline really narrowing and the teacher pipeline narrowing. And at the same time, the pipeline's narrowing, we recognize that we're not as diverse in our principalship across the state and the country as we need to be. What strategies or what thoughts do you have about how we might encourage others to consider being a teacher, being a principal, perhaps being crazy enough to be a superintendent? What can we do to encourage others to come into this work that we are so passionate about?
Yes, I agree with you. It's so important to talk about and really create strategies or use practices to diversify our workforce. When I first came to Shuford, our student population is about 50% white and 50% students of color, so a combination of student populations. And our teacher workforce was about 3% teachers of color. And over the last 4 years, we've increased that to about 22%. So that still doesn't match our student population. However, I think that, I don't know any right answers, but I will tell you, I think that increase for us has come from really setting a vision, being very intentional in recruiting, teachers of all diversities, but also making sure that we've created a vision that is really focused on equity. And I think that when you share that and people know that, it attracts teachers of color to your building. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have increased. And I wish I could say that it was more intentional, but we have since then we reworked even like our interview questions and making sure that we're hiring staff that is focused on understanding social justice and understanding equity and really thinking through that mindset. So I wish I had better responses to your questions, because I think that our increase has happened for a lot of different reasons, and it hasn't always been intentional. I think it needs to be intentional, but I also think how you share your vision of your school, I think it will attract teachers of color too as well.
Absolutely. Tabari, as you think about just attracting teachers and principals and administrators to this work, what comes to mind? You most recently have worked at the high school level where students are trying to figure out what profession they may be interested in. What can we do with our high school students, with our students? What can we do to increase this pipeline? What are your thoughts around that, Tabari?
We definitely have to garner the interest at younger ages, mainly, i.e. middle school, I would say. Right now, we don't start until senior year high school when we get to talking about it. I will say some districts have become extremely innovative, like in Edgecombe. They have their Grow Your Own program that is fully funded with scholarships, or they're sending their students straight from school to college to be teachers, and they're paying for it. But that was a lot of intentional work with my good friend, Matt Bristow Smith, and his great superintendent he has down there. She is awesome. She is so innovative.
Let's call her name, Dr. Valerie Bridges.
That's right, Dr. Valerie Bridges. Let's do it. I just wanted to make sure I gave that plug because she's awesome. They were successful in this approach. This was 3 years in the making, and they actually made it come to fruition this year. But you have the 2x2 program to assist rural areas and to getting kids into community college for their college courses and then transfer to the university system. We have Troops to Teacher, the Human Capital Roundtable work that is opening the portal to attract more diverse candidates, to attract candidates, period. But mainly, even the governor has weighed in with the Drive Task Force that he has going on from a state level to try to get recruitment. And y'all, what it is we're not telling our story, I don't think. What education has become is the second tier occupation. Kids go to school and I want to be an engineer. They look at everything that makes $100,000 because they think it'll be easy. Then they get in, the credits are hard, and then they fall back to education, or they graduate and they use up the residency model, the ladder entry model to come back in. Then they find it hard to pass the EdTPA. And what we find out in the Drive Task Force and the Human Capital Roundtable work is when it comes to minority teachers, we have not understood that they have the highest attrition rate within their first 3 years of BTs. And what they say in the surveys is that they did not feel important, or they didn't feel that someone empathized with their unique disposition in being a minority in the teaching profession. It's a different set of needs of support that we need. And again, we throw out all and we bring them into a BT roundtable, and then we talk on the surface about things that you can do, but you never meet the unique needs of each and every of those teachers gathered in that threshold. Mm-hmm. So I will say that while 82% of the teachers in North Carolina are of the majority population, I will tell you that 78%. All right, this comes from Dr. Graham. I don't know if you've heard him at Winston-Salem State, but he is a monster. Oh, he's a monster. Him and James Ford, I think I could put posters of them two up there when it comes to equity and diversity. They're great at what they do. But then he dropped the bomb on us and he said 54% of the students we serve are minority in the state of North Carolina. Mm-hmm. That dichotomy alone, as you said before, is disproportionate. And again, we need to start remedying this so we can look at things with an equity lens, so that when we're training those 54%, the curriculum matches their unique disposition and their core values coming from the culture that they come from.
Absolutely. Tabari, so very well said. We were all nodding our head as you were speaking. And, each of these topics, as we think back over these key findings that we've talked about across these 2 episodes, each of those topics could have been an entire podcast by itself. And it really points back to how comprehensive the role of principal is. And in fact, the 7th finding is simply research on school principals is highly variable, and the field requires new investment in a rigorous, cohesive body of research. And I think we'd all say Amen. We need more research to help us do this work that we're in the field trying to do to help us tackle these various issues that pop up and are simply reflections of our community. And so let me draw our conversation to a close by going back to the start with the quote that I started with from the research that says, an effective principal's impact is stronger and broader than previously thought. My friends, having the opportunity to spend time with the three of you, I just feel renewed and empowered. You encourage me just listening to you. I just really want to encourage you in return in the work you're doing. And I want to thank you for the work you did as a state principal of the year. And Kisha, your time's coming to a close here very shortly. But the work you did as the state principal of the year, speaking up for all principals, but more importantly, for the work you continue to do for each and every student and each and every child in our great state. My friends, thank you for being so generous with your time on the EdLeader podcast. Thank you, friends.
So much.
Thank you.
I hope that you enjoyed our conversation today with Kisha, Carrie, and Tabari. Over the course of the last 2 episodes of this special series on the research around how principals affect students in schools, each has shared incredible wisdom that's absolutely resonated within me, particularly when Tabari shared that we sometimes lose some of our students when we use the language of all, as in all students. Instead, he says, we really need to be talking about each and every student because each and every student matters, and each and every student is worthy of our very best. Speaking of worthy of our very best, I want to thank you for spending time with me today, and thank you for all that you do for every student, every teacher, and every staff member. You are making a difference. If no one else has told you, I want you to know that I believe in you. Good day.
Thank you for listening to the EdLeader podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast and consider leaving a review with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts so that we may continue to grow the EdLeader community. We hope that you have enjoyed your time with Dr. Jackson. Until next time.